Now, folks, there's a guy named Whatifalthist, and he's a channel with over 700,000 subscribers, and he has a video from about 8 months ago titled "The Greatest Lie Ever Told," and that video, just a couple days ago, was amplified by Elon Musk, one of the wealthiest people on the planet. And, well, I figure we should probably dive into that and see what it's all about, considering the wealthiest man on the planet thinks that it's a good idea. Well, brace yourselves, because I have literally no idea what this video is about. I have none. Let's dive into it, shall we?
For those that don't know, the two topics I've studied the most are anthropology and history. These two fields have gone on radically different trajectories over the course of the last century. For history, it stayed relatively objective, barring a few obvious fields.
One of the things I'm eternally grateful for is that in history, as a discipline, if you get a random book explaining any given epoch bookstore, you could expect it to be relatively unbiased and well-written. This is the thing history is the best at versus other fields. That's objectively incorrect. One, any given epic bookstore or epoch bookstore okay, whatever. Ignoring the grammatical issues we've already encountered 17 seconds into this, objectively speaking, history is not written without a point of view at all. It's one of the most subjective fields. GamerG, I think what he's trying to say is that if you try and pick out a book on any given epoch from a bookstore, and he just completely was incapable of saying that. So we're, again, 17 seconds into the content that the world's richest man has amplified, and it's already dog shit. And I'm not surprised. What does that mean? He's saying that you can basically walk into a bookstore, pick a random history book, and it's going to be unbiased and accurate, which is just not true at all at any point in history. If you're like looking at European history and you're thinking, look at all of these unbiased firsthand accounts, they're all biased. All of them. Most of them are written by like members of the Catholic Church and like the clergy and stuff. Like most of them are written from a specific point of view with a specific kind of political end and purpose to the writing itself. You know, like if you believe this, you are one of the most gullible motherfuckers on the planet, okay?
Like colonialism, history hasn't faced the plague of obfuscation, which completely destroyed the field of anthropology. Anthropology is a pretty barren field now. I was just...
It's not at all. You just don't like it. Like you just genuinely, you're just not really paying attention, or you just don't like the bent of current anthropological research because it's not treating, skull shapes as the end-all be-all.
An idea this non-AI came up with randomly by watching the stream earlier is a band called A Cop for Cutie. You have moved on, but I felt the need.
Honestly, I'd listen to a band called A Cab for Cutie.
Just checking Amazon's
Thank you for the
top
$5 dono
recommendations for books on anthropology, since I was cross-referencing it with my own favorite books on that topic. I went through the list and realized that, unironically, 3/4 of the top books in anthropology were literal pseudoscience. When I say pseudoscience, I don't mean...
Dude, you do not have any high ground on that.
The spirits like to convey the message that you should mentally see me as Gandalf.
This as the political attack it's normally used at, but rather from the actual scientific definition, in that pseudoscience is the replacement of scientific falsification for circular arguments based off what's basically faith. In this case, belief in inherent equality, the noble savage, and the blank slate. The irony is that the people
No, and anthropologists have actively rejected the noble savage trope for like the last 60 years. Like, the idea you're pushing here is insanely outdated. Yeah, all of these physicists are embracing geocentrism. Like, no, they're not. Sorry.
Involved project pseudoscience onto their opponents and use that as the dominant vector to control the discourse.
You literally believe that you are the fucking spiritual incarnation of Odin and Jesus Christ. Like, shut the fuck up. You do not have the high ground to talk about this.
I've invented a term named SAW, which stands for
God.
Studies in Ancient Wisdom. As I will explain later, I believe the 21st century has...
You know, I love this guy, because he'll just like straight up be like, I don't like the conclusions of this given field, so rather than interact with it, I'm gonna create my own field of science that, you know, with blackjack and hookers. And then it's, of course, dog shit.
Has already seen a scientific breakthrough on a vastly unparalleled level, which we are yet to have recognized. I think said breakthrough will create a completely new paradigm and will completely change history beyond what we understand now. What SAW started to find in about half a dozen different fields is that the 20th century pulled off something absolutely incredible. The 20th century, an era...
Jesus H. Christ. I almost spit out my tea at You Should See Me as Gandalf. It never gets old.
It really doesn't. But you know what? I'm really proud of you, One-Eyed Heathen.
I am very proud of the mental horsepower you have. Of history with freedom of speech and press, with the most information of any era ever up to its point, with the most advanced intellectual institutions, was able to seduce its populations into believing the most absurd lie ever. The thing that really shocked me as I stumbled upon this myself is the sheer enormity of the lie. It's so vast that anyone who discovers it themselves feel insane, in that they just sense that it can't be possible.
Yeah. So if you're ever thinking something and your brain goes, whoa, that's too insane to even be possible, that's just a sign that you know the truth. If you think of insane bullshit, that's just because you're on to something. You know, that's a very convenient set of beliefs there, Rudyard.
Let me show you how we've all been complicit in the greatest lie ever told in human history. Something our descendants will laugh to themselves that we fell for.
Let's go. Lay it on us. I do not have enough alcohol for this.
You know, have we ever seen Rudyard and Ryuho Ohawa in RHE same room? Even the names are similar.
You know, I choose to believe that Rudyard is the spiritual reincarnation of Ryuho Okawa, okay? Ryuho Okawa died and via spirit transfer put himself into this young man.
One great lie we've believed is that the internet is
story
secure,
girl.
and only recently have we come to realize the danger of having your info online. That's why...
Oh God, I hate that he advertises a website I actually find useful. You know, the thing is, I could get drunk watching this right now. It would make it more palatable, but I don't know. I don't know.
Part 1. How I stumbled onto this. Realizing the sheer scale of this lie might be the most important event of my life. And so
can we just like point out that like if you actually have a really insightful thing to share, you'd share it right away. You'd talk about it right away. You wouldn't like preamble for like 30 minutes like I'm sure he's about to.
In some ways, one of the purposes of this channel is to share my own personal journey of trying to disentangle how big this lie is and how...
Who are you the spiritual reincarnation of? No one. I am singular and alone. I came into this world via fluke and happenstance, and I intend to leave it permanently in the same way.
How I personally tried to intellectually and psychologically cope with it. Having this audience helps keep me sane with just the sheer scale of it. One half of my brain forgets there's an audience for this journey, while the other half tries to monetize it. Human nature can be funny sometimes.
Can you guys understand now what I mean when I say that Elon Musk retweeting this particular thing really indicates a crash out of epic proportions? Like, dude is not doing okay.
Let me tell you how I figured this out. Although I'm not the first person to notice it. There were probably some super based people who knew this whole time with...
I don't know who this guy is, but I feel like from the context and what I know of Rudyard, this guy might be a Nazi.
My guess being old school European aristocrats like Amaury de Riancourt or Hermann Hoppes being the first, but the people who were my biggest influences...
Just real quick, like...
or Hermann Hoppes being old school European aristocrats like Amaury de Riancourt.
He's mealy mouthing it. Yeah, I tried Googling what it sounded like to me, and I'm getting results from the Forgotten Realms wiki, so I don't think that's correct. That might be more correct, Mr. Malachite. Let's try that with your version. Nope, still nothing. Still nothing. Cool. I have no idea who this is. The source Drizzt.
Or Hermann Hoppes being the...
Okay, that one let's maybe use that guy as the base instead. Hermann Hoppes. Why did he throw a Z on there? His name doesn't have a fucking Z in it. Why are you saying it with a Z? God damn. Oh, he's an anarcho-capitalist. He's an anarcho-capitalist who hates democracy. Excellent. Excellent stuff. Oh, fuck. Oh, fuck. Jesus Christ. He's famous for his book Democracy, the God That Failed, and he wants... Sorry. I'm just the top lines of this guy's Wikipedia. The book favors the creation of exclusionary covenant communities that are founded for the purpose of protecting family and kin. A section of the book favoring exclusion of Democrats and homosexuals from society. Oh, fuck. Okay, yeah, all right. Oh, fuck.
I am the intellectual equivalent of an assault rifle.
The first, but the people who were my biggest influences were Kurt Doolittle and Edward Dutt, who really showed the structure of how it happened and what went wrong. Although I don't agree with said authors on everything since they're significantly further right than me. The way I found this is that in high school, I could tell adults weren't telling me the full truth about the world. Both of my parents were conservatives by the time I graduated high school, and I had been reading a lot of history. It was obvious to me that the things our era of history believed were in a clear, massive disjoint with the rest of human knowledge over history, although I didn't realize the sheer scale of the lie until later. In high school, I had a series of questions about the world which got me into studying history and anthropology. Talking about just these would probably be a good video in of itself if
Yeah, okay, bud.
you folks are interested. But some of the questions are, why is Latin America or Mexico poor while America is rich? Why did my home state of Pennsylvania go into decline so harshly? Why hasn't Southeast Asia achieved more as a civilization? Why did the West rise to global dominance?
Oh God. My best answers to these questions. Latin America is poor since the Spanish established an extractive system in which there was no incentive for productivity due to the elites stealing your stuff or high regulations. Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute on that one. The extractive system you're talking about is colonialism, and there was an incentive for productivity. It was insane violence or murder. That, like, the incentive was not being killed or tortured to death. You know, like that was the incentive for the extractive system that was established under colonialism in Latin America. So, let's just be clear about that. It wasn't a result of high regulations or a lack of incentive structure. The incentive structure was actually pretty clear. Point 2, Pennsylvania crashed so hard as a state since socialist governments took over, which increased regulations and corruption. On top of this, globalization opened up cheaper places like the American South, Mexico, Thailand, or China. And you know what's insane there? It's that Pennsylvania's never been controlled by socialists. He's just making that part up in order to cover for the real reason that labor crashed in Pennsylvania, which is the offshoring of manufacturing to other countries where labor is cheaper, something that he supports under capitalism. Okay, point 3, the West dominated the world due to many reasons, but I would explicitly say a more fluid social structure which forced elites to compete rather than predate. My good bitch. We literally had a class of people called robber barons. But okay. We literally had company towns that fostered local monopolies. But okay. Creating adaptive systems like science, democracy, meritocracy, and capitalism. Fun fact, all systems can be adaptive. Those are adaptation is not unique to science or democracy or meritocracy, which isn't really a system. It's more of like a goal, an aspiration, if you will, and capitalism. Like those are, other than meritocracy, those are all adaptive systems, and there are many more beyond that. Western culture also prioritizes the truth, honor, freedom, and heroism, unlike other cultures that have never at any point prioritized truth or honor or freedom or heroism. Yeah, definitely not like there are prominent, cultures that have like elaborate rituals around honor or truth or heroism or freedom. Yeah, definitely not. Meritocracy is just a dog shit hierarchy. I mean, meritocracy isn't even a hierarchy. It is a system that justifies the hierarchy, right? Like it is the aspirational idea that like, oh yeah, people who are better at something should be more in charge of that thing, but like that's never how it actually works out in practice, Then his next answer is Southeast Asia didn't accomplish as much as other societies due to slave economies, tropical climate, and lack of military or external threats. I would counter this by saying that if he thinks that, he just hasn't read any Southeast Asian history, genuinely. And then MENA practiced the largest slave trade in history, pulling mostly from Africa, yet doesn't have black populations due to mass castration, which I'm not even going to touch that one. Jesus Christ.
Or why doesn't the Middle East have black people? If you're interested in my answers to these questions,
also the Middle East, black people do live in the Middle East. Like they literally do. All right.
Look at this text wall. In the process of trying to answer these, I ended up learning the things I needed for this channel. However, one of the biggest black pills I got out of this is that current academia has no interest in actually explaining how the world works. In the process of trying
Yeah, I'm not arguing with you, Story Girl. Like it is a justification used in order to establish a power structure and hierarchy. But it's one that I think a lot of people find intuitively attractive when you first present it, right? That's all I'm saying. That's what makes it useful to people trying to establish those hierarchies.
To answer those questions that should be the most underlying variables of global anthropology and human geography, is that it was incredibly difficult to find the answer. I had to read a variety of different books and put the answers together myself. If anthropology was a genuine field, there would already be a bunch of books explicitly written on these sorts of topics that entry-level college students would have to read in the first year.
There are books on anthropology that are written that are accessible to first year university students. Like, what are you talking about, man?
What I consistently found instead is that academia ended up pushing for non-falsifiable political narratives. For a frame of reference, the purpose of the scientific method is to create tests and
Oh, God. Okay. The iron rule of science from Michael Strevin's The Knowledge Machine. 1. Strive to solve all arguments by empirical testing. 2. Conduct an empirical test to decide between a pair of hypotheses. Perform an experimental measurement, one of whose possible outcomes can be explained by one hypothesis and not the other.
in which the result of the test proves one paradigm and disproves another. For example, a study on which group of white Americans has the highest income, by showing Italian and Jewish Americans have higher incomes than English Americans by looking at the statistics. From this, we can make the assessment that America
These are some of the stats from the 80s. The fact that the two wealthiest groups in America were some of the most oppressed, and that British Americans are so low, suggests that America isn't a society primarily driven by discrimination. It couldn't possibly be that our immigration system is predicated and means tests for wealth. Couldn't possibly be that like wealthier people immigrate to the United States in general, and thus those populations are buoyed by that household wealth. Clearly, it must be instead that America just doesn't discriminate against people. I don't like Rudyard mentioning Jewish people. I don't trust him doing that. You shouldn't, because I just put out a video where he talks about Jewish civilization. And if you thought at the beginning of this that I was talking out of my butt about how this guy thinks that Jewish civilization is like a nuclear reactor and that the Jewish IQ is 1,000 years more advanced than other civilizations, those are things he actually says and believes. So he's a mega Nazi. Oh yeah, I have literally like a 12-hour breakdown of this guy's spiritual beliefs, and it's basically just all Nazi esotericism. It's just like a quasi mysticism infused with like beliefs about magical bloodlines and like Nazi ideology. It's crazy.
Is no longer a WASP oligarchy like it was a century ago. What I consistently found is that anthropology departments were predicated upon cyclical answers which it was physically impossible to break out of. For an example of this, and we will go through a lot, the belief in human equality was never tested. Wait, that's wrong. It was.
Could his source not afford a spell checker? Genuinely, no. He all of his notes that he puts on screen are dog shit and poorly written.
Was tested dozens of times and turned out to be wrong. No one in academia actually used any evidence to see if people are all inherently equal and the same. Ironically, taking the
oh my god. Okay. Let's go back. I didn't hear the initial part of his example.
The belief in human equality was never tested. Wait, that's wrong. It was tested dozens of times and turned out to be wrong. No one in academia actually used any evidence to see if people are all inherently equal and the same.
I'm real sorry. Does this stupid motherfucker think that when people say we're all born equal, that like what that means is we all have the same IQ? That's what you think people meant when they were talking about how all of us are born equal? Like, genuinely, I don't think he knows what equal means in that sense. It doesn't mean that, like, oh, we all have the same capabilities or the same, like, physical or mental capabilities. It means that we all are deserving of rights equally under the law, regardless of those abilities or lack thereof.
Ironically, taking the faith-based argument from Christianity, but starting with different first principle.
Wait, it's not a faith-based principle. It's you can make the argument for equality from like an atheist perspective. It is fully capable of being a secular value.
And if these people loathe Christianity, instead of saying that life is good and the world is rational under God's plan, it moved to equality and not judging others to be a statement of faith under which all other assumptions are predicated.
Also, just so we're clear here, we're 8 minutes into the video and Rudyard is already rejecting Enlightenment thinking, which is one of the main hallmarks of Nazi ideology. Just, as an FYI. for those of you keeping track.
The thing that really horrified me here is that for all of these basic assumptions, they were just never tested. And when they were, the results were thrown out. And
No, because it's a point being made about morals, about ethics. It's a point being made about what would make society better. And it turns out it makes society better to treat people equally under the law and give people equal rights under the law, regardless of the nature of their birth, regardless of their station at birth. That is better for society. It is good to treat people the same under the law.
in fact, I believe that this is intentional, given that when said assumptions were tested, it turned out they were wrong.
Also, I don't think, let me put it this way, Rudyard, I don't think you want to go the direction of saying that, like, I don't know, people, certain groups of people can be labeled as deserving different rights. Because let me tell you, I don't think you're going to be in the group you think you're going to be in.
Implications for this are truly enormous, in that what you believe about human nature determines every single aspect of human life. Whether what you prioritize as an individual person, what you hold sacred, what you teach in school, how you organize the family, workplace governance, and anything else you could possibly imagine.
Oh, Story Girl, this guy's absolutely a eugenicist. Like, just spoiler alert, everyone. This guy is like a Nazi eugenicist, like full on. Well, I'm sure we're going to get there over the course of the next 40 more minutes of this. Jesus Christ.
In short, the left just made stuff up about human nature and then used it as a bludgeon to completely reconstruct society according to their fantasies.
Yeah, as opposed to you, who thinks that, like, magic is real, and you think that based on a book that was assembled multiple different times throughout history by multiple different groups of people and is still translated vastly differently today in a variety of different contexts. And you just happen to think you lucked into the right interpretation of said magical book. And you are now saying that that belief is somehow more rational than one arrived at that is demonstrably proven to benefit society. Okay.
I like to say, if you're not basing your assessments of the world off history, you're just making stuff up.
You literally just said that you're basing your belief off of Christianity, which is not history. That's theology.
The first place I stumbled into this was seeing that academia had no interest in explaining the questions above. A lot of them,
What are you talking about? There are entire departments to address those questions. Philosophy department? Anybody?
They literally just didn't care. For why Pennsylvania had failed so hard, I legitimately did not find a real explanation, and instead
What? Political science department?
Had to rely off basic folk wisdom around where I grew up in Philly. This isn't...
Oh, okay, yeah, so you went to your university, didn't find anything that initially matched what you were looking for, and decided, fuck it, I'm just gonna go around and collect folk wisdom from the Pennsylvanian folk.
Important because over 100 million Americans got screwed over by the collapse of the Rust Belt, and if academia was honest, they would try to figure out why. So,
To be fair, magic and mystery is part of his history, along with the secrets of gummy berry juice.
Indeed, Sake Tanuki. Thank you for the 2 tier 1 subs. University Rust Belt collapse. Let's see. Oh, look at that. Literally took me like 2 seconds. Remaking the Rust Belt, the post-industrial transformation of North America. Wowee. Or, manufacturing decline. Manufacturing decline. Jason Hacksworth offers a powerful critique of the role of the Rust Belt cities in American political discourse. Oh, the Rust Belt bookshelf. What's that? Oh, wow. Look at that. Looks like there's just a bunch of books here on the history of the Rust Belt. That's crazy. All of those hyperlinks are to different books about the collapse of the Rust Belt, but no one's interested in that, I guess.
Wouldn't happen again.
Gotta go wander around and find people on their porches willing to share folk wisdom with me.
Same with why the Middle East doesn't have black people. For Latin America's poverty and the West's civilizational dominance, the authority...
Yeah, just real quick here. Remember now, when Rudyard talks about world civilizations, it's based on this bullshit map that he pulled out of his ass, okay? I want you all to take a good, hard look at this map, okay? This is the map of world civilizations. And Africa just has none, I guess, in the interior above South Africa and below the civilization of Islam. Like, can we like this, when he's talking about civilization, he's referring not to like the conventional understanding of world civilizations, but instead to his own made up bullshit. His own imagination land, just as an FYI.
Authorities told me that Latin America was destroyed due to extractive colonial systems, and the West...
You literally described the extractive system earlier in one of your footnotes.
...rose to dominance due to oppressing the Third World. As I study those topics...
Oh my god, I find the idea that the West rose due to exploiting the rest of the world hard to believe, given the... Western Europe was already the wealthiest place in the world going back into the 14th century. Once Europe gave up the colonies, it surged in economic wealth, while the former colonies stagnated. There's no correlation between wealth and colonies in Europe. Former massive colonial empires like Russia, Spain, Portugal, and Turkey are poor, while countries that didn't or barely had colonial empires like Scandinavia, Switzerland, or Germany are wealthy. The same exploitation argument could be used for Asia, which had huge empires. And I just want to pause right there and like say, no, the extractive machinery of colonialism, the reason those colonies didn't all explode in wealth once that machinery was extracted and like people returned to the motherland was because they were reliant on the flow of capital into them in order to sustain their entire economy. So when that relationship ended, like the people there were left to pick up the pieces, often with the need for violence to do so. So like that doesn't really allow them to pick up the pieces in quite a productive way, okay? And like, also, Germany had colonies. Also, I just need you to understand that America still has colonies. And we have colonies. We built out the American empire and its colonies specifically to get the wealth, to extract the wealth. We did that specifically to do that. Settler colonialism is literally the basis on which like America's wealth was built. The westward expansion was colonialism. It was the colonizing of the West. Like the idea here that like, oh, well, if you just don't have colonies, then you're wealthy. Like that's not actually what the data shows, buddy. Once Europe gave up the colonies, it surged in economic wealth. No. Also, once they gave up their colonies, they started using and relying on wealth it had extracted. Fuck it. Jesus Christ. I had trouble believing Latin America never rose due to colonial exploitation, since I frankly just didn't see the evidence for said exploitation past the Spanish Empire. Well, I saw a tremendous amount of evidence for local governments exploiting the population. I wonder where local governments got the idea to perpetuate an exploitative system. I wonder where that idea came from. Latin countries which changed to pro-market policies like Chile, Argentina, Costa Rica, or pre-Castro Cuba were wealthy, and those which didn't stayed poor. The people at the top of society were wealthy. The people at the top of those societies were wealthy. The vast majority of the people in those countries were not. Pre-Castro, Batista had like fucking slave plantations, bitch. Jesus.
Myself, I found this hard to believe due to reasons which I explain in this text wall. What I consistently found is that every single thing in the leftist paradigm leads back to the same conclusion. That being that the oppressed could not be held responsible for failure, while the oppressors or successful always had to be held responsible for any negatives.
Well, yeah, the people who are in charge of a society are the ones who are responsible for the abuses of that society. Yes, the people running that system are responsible for that. It's not the fault of the people underneath the oppressed system for the system's abuses.
It's just an intellectual shell game in which you have to rationalize every single aspect of the world in order to reach that result. This is argument from faith, as I've said a few times before. It's literally in direct contradiction with the stated purpose of the scientific method. The great irony here is that the people...
The left is intellectually schizophrenic. They literally say this. Science is white male oppression based off white ideas like rationality or truth. 2, they are the science, and everyone else is misinformation. They literally say the ultimate aim of politics is to get them in power. Let's believe them. Politics is power. It's not the ultimate aim of politics. Isn't to get in power. It is to wield power. Power is politics. That's literally what it's all about. And 2, no one says science is white male oppression. What are you talking about?
Pushing this claim to be the science, and anyone who contradicts them is pseudoscience.
Yeah, it is almost like being able to pay for armies and guns allows you to run things. It's almost like being able to do that is wielding power. Then that's in turn politics. It's crazy how all those things might be politics.
Even if the people who contradict them use the scientific method more than they do. One of the things I found...
It's just dumb nonsense. Unfortunately, guys, this dumb nonsense has been viewed by almost, 420,000 people. This guy's channel is over 700,000 people. And this particular video just got amplified by the world's richest man, a dumb fuck named Elon Musk. So unfortunately, this insane bullshit is worth going over in its entirety to point out how insane and dog shit and bullshit it is.
Which basically resulted in me stumbling into creating the acronym SAW, or Studies in Ancient Wisdom, is that I realized over 99% of history agreed on a series of rational precepts and starting points that our society disagreed with.
Oh man, I can't wait for you to try and demonstrate what all societies have agreed upon. I can't wait. It's definitely not gonna be immediately falsifiable.
Horrifyingly, our society had made this completely taboo, and often in much of the Western world, illegal to question. Things that were just completely obvious for all of human history. To break down some of the beliefs...
Things all the rest of history believe that we don't. Men and women are biologically different. I genuinely, I don't think that this is true. The understanding of biology was so primitive, like 300 years ago, that like I genuinely don't know if that's true. You still, until like the 1800s, at least in the West, like people didn't know how like babies were made. They didn't know what happened in the womb. They were just like, I don't know, something happens in there. Race, sex, ethnicity, and class are partly biological. Man, I do want to tell you that I told you guys eugenics was coming up here. And yes, that's true. You have a wealth gene, according to this racist motherfucker. Oh, you're poor? Should have been born with the wealth gene. 3, progress is not an innate law of the world. I mean, it's not. 4, family, community, and nation is the bedrock of human life. 5, war is net. Have we covered this video before, or has he reused this list? I think he's reused this list. If I have covered this video before, I'm going to be so mad. I'm going to be so fucking mad that I've done it twice. War is really nasty. War is a nasty reality to accept. Yeah, dude can't spell for shit.
Almost everyone else in history had.
We haven't covered this video before. Okay, good. I know he's used this list before though, in like a different video. He must be really proud of it. And the fact that he's reused it makes me even more upset that in all the times he's used it, he hasn't noticed that this accept is the wrong version of accept.
Except us, and took to be completely obvious, which are taboo to question today. The first being that there are inherent biological...
Also, the greatest things are divine. A red vine? A redivine? The greatest things are redivine, and the lowest are demonic. Dude literally forgets spaces every damn day. There are archetypal forms of the universe. Fuck off. Human nature is innately fallible. Yeah, no one believes that today. Everyone believes humans are perfect. It's true.
Logical differences between men and
Oh, also, again, if you're ever curious about his thoughts on the divine and spirit world, got a good playlist for you guys. Consciousness exists in its own right. Uh-huh. I am gonna throw this out there that like literally not like these are not constants that you can find in every civilization. Sorry.
women. Next is some inherent biological reality behind class, race, and ethnicity. That progress is not some natural law of the universe, but something that only occurs under certain incentive structures, which are rare over.
Yeah, true dissonance. I might be engaging in ableism here by critiquing this man. Like, he might genuinely be... I know he's unwell, but like, unfortunately, he's also a fascist. So, you know, maybe I'm engaging in ableism, but I'm engaging in ableism to a level I find acceptable.
For history. Family, community, and nation is the bedrock of social life. That war is a nasty part of the human condition that we have to accept. Equality doesn't really exist, and some things are innately better than others.
Whatifalthist is just dumb enough to not know if you've heard it before, had a stroke, or are while watching the same video again.
Genuinely, he has repeated himself so many times in his videos that like I do find myself in that exact position, Sake Tanuki. Thank you for the 5 tier 1 subs. Also, I really enjoy John Bainbridge's comment calling this fableism. I think that might be the best describer of this. This is fableism.
That the highest levels of beauty, achievement, and greatness are pulling from the divine, while the lowest levels are pulling from demonic forces. That these do not exist.
Oh my god, wait, I just noticed the last one, number 14. History operates in cycles of bad times decadence. He's literally doing the hard times create hard men create good times create weak men create hard times. Like, it's just, he's just literally doing like the fucking sci-fi, the shit tier sci-fi trope that like all the fasci do. Oh my god, dude. He literally critiqued anthropology for talking about cycles.
Physically in the way we describe, but are underlying...
Oh, this guy loves Jordan Peterson, forlorn.
Archetypal principles or forms that operate over physical matter. That human nature is inherently corruptible and requires social traditions to keep us in check. That there is a spirit world and God. That the human soul and consciousness is a force in its own right. That human life and happiness is predicated less upon material wealth and more so upon social relations or values. That the universe is a self-reflective, emergent phenomena which adapts to different situations. To frame this, literally everyone else in history besides us believed all of that stuff. Even the most educated people in the West at the start of World War I believed most of the stuff I said above. Literally every other era in history besides that.
You know, I would love to see a citation on that, Rudyard. I would love citation where you got all of the info for what most people believed. I would love to see this. You want to know who would fail the name 3 women challenge? It's this guy. This guy would instantly fail. Name any 3 women. He would fail it. I guarantee it.
Believed in them. I have a mental heuristic that if someone put Isaac Newton, Christ, Confucius, Buddha, Thomas Aquinas, and Aristotle in a room, if they agree on something, I'm just going to assume it's true as a baseline.
This is literally just Ryu Hoakawa's thinking. This is just some happy science bullshit. And you know, what if all of those people were also angels? What if they were actually the highest level angels? You know, and if you were also very smart, you could also be a high level angel. It's the dream blunt rotation.
That since these people were the greatest geniuses, often coming from civilizations with zero connection to the other figures. I use this principle since I don't have infinite computing power in my brain.
Wouldn't they all hate each other? Wrong. They would all be unable to understand each other.
And I don't have infinite knowledge, given I am not God. Thus, I have to develop different mental tools that operate under the assumptions of my...
Wait, you're not God? Wait, I thought we were told to think of you in a certain light.
The spirits like to convey the message that you should mentally see me as Gandalf.
Oh.
My lack of information.
No, guys. He's not God. He's just like an emissary of God, sent to bring us all back into the one true faith.
One of the methods to do that is to find other thinkers more brilliant than I, that I cannot understand the depth of their thought, and then if I can get them in different contexts to agree on something,
of course, by the way, of course, Rudyard would really respect this guy. I mean, look at his skull shape. Rudyard's calipers must have been going crazy looking at that guy.
Nearly scientific.
This guy couldn't pass a Bechdel test.
No, he couldn't. Sake Tanuki, thank you for the 2 tier 1 subs. And also, with Otro, the juicy brain comment really got me. It's so bulbous. It's so, yeah, damn, how much cranial trauma did this man have to get a statue like that?
Way, I can make a probabilistic bet that what they agree on is probably true. This should just be complete common.
This is a great book on this philosophical points different world religions share. I'm sorry, this is a great book on this philosophic points different world religions share, of which adherents to those religions are often unaware of. It's brilliant and I highly recommend. Can I just say, like, if you read so much, you should be able to internalize the ability to write a little bit better, Also, just out of curiosity, because I always wonder. Let's just take a look here. I'm just wondering if this guy is a fascist. I'm just curious. He seems fine.
Sense, but our society hasn't thought of it yet. The thing that terrifies me is that our society has no interest in knowing that we are literally the only people ever who believe in this stuff. That fits the literal definition of madness. One of my friends like to say that if you're the only sane person in an insane asylum, that makes you the crazy one. Crazy people don't put a sign on their heads that say, I'm crazy. The way to find madness is to find a person who has no interest in seeing the outside world, showing the fantasies in their mind to be incorrect. One of my friends has a beautiful quote that madness is the unhealthy obsession on a single topic to the detriment of everything else. For our civilization, I think we have a variety of mental illnesses at once.
The syncretism is off the chart.
Saki Tanuki, thank you for the 2 tier 1 subs. I mean, I got to agree with him on this one. I think we have a variety of mental illnesses at once here. I just don't think it's in the same way he's thinking.
Something that probably deserves its own video. God, I must have promised to make hundreds of videos by this point. However, the unhealthy obsession which has stolen our world's soul is the idea of equality. Every single idea must be processed with how it relates to equality. How we must organize our society, religion, philosophy, corporations, art, and literally anything else must pander to our obsession with equality and the abdication of responsibility for the
literally, the concept of equality is that we are all treated equally under the law. Like that's the concept of equality there. But like I'm sorry that like you're like, well, I want to organize companies in a way that allows them to do illegal things. Like that's kind of more reflective of you, right? Like, if you live in a society where people are treated equally under the law, and your position is, I want to treat people unequally under the law, like, then, okay, make the case for that. But you're just kind of saying, well, no, it's bad to treat people equally under the law, though. So make the case for that. Make the argument.
Defeated. The problem is equality by itself is completely antithetical to reality. We are stuck in a horrifying Darwinist jungle where the strong eat.
Yeah, which is why we have a thing called the law. We came up with laws to govern our behaviors better than just, having anarchy and like killing each other, stealing from each other, fucking each other without consequence. Like we came up with a system to regulate our behavior a bit better and to like elaborate on the social contract in order that like people aren't fucked over for no reason. Like, yeah, the law doesn't reflect the natural world because we made it. It is an artificial construct that betters all of our lives.
eat the weak without remorse. The lion is not equal to the deer and the chieftain to the foot soldier. As time began to pass and I read more...
Hey, just real quick, you made an interesting comparison just then. The chieftain to the foot soldier. What distinguishes the chieftain from the foot soldier? Would that distinction not be something backed up by, say, a law of some kind? A kind of legalistic hierarchy that elaborates on what that hierarchy is and how it functions? Would that not be law? Oh my God.
I realized the people in charge had literally no idea what they were talking about. I cross-referenced the scientific information, which everyone, including leftists, agreed with, against the regime's right to rule, and I realized the disconnect is...
Yeah, what does that mean? When you say the regime's right to rule, elaborate on that.
Truly enormous. Let's look into what the science says today about these sacred cows. Part 2. Follow the science. When I was growing up, the school system was borderline obsessed with increasing knowledge or interest in STEM, or science, math, and tech topics. This was partly a Cold War remnant and also a material...
Why did he say leftist like a slur? Because this man is a Nazi.
Society, which saw no value for the wisdom the humanities teaches. The irony is that I'm not particularly that...
As a maddened anarcho-wildebeest, I definitely qualify as everyone's outcomes should be treated like they have equal priority and value because laws are sussy. Legal equality is a specific subset of that meaning. God. Leftist is the new C-slur. Leftist is the new as we all know, leftists are the ultimate prey animals.
Good or interested in science. However, I do have a policy of trying to read at least a few books on any given topic and keep up with the scientific consensus of any given academic field is. However, even with all that effort, the public is thousands of miles away.
Uncle Gumbald, I did finish that guy's video.
From what the science says. The people who say follow the science have no clue what the science even is. I find it funny how much the educational institutions have failed in this regard. This wasn't that hard for me to...
You can't really use your time in this video to point at other people and laugh at them for not understanding shit when you've literally been talking out of your ass for 16 minutes.
Search. None of the things I'm about to say here should be controversial. This is stuff if you interviewed an important academic in any of these fields, unless they felt like their job was on the line, or that they'd be socially outcasted, they'd tell you immediately. You can pick out these sorts of politics in how academics deal with each other, in which under certain contexts, academics can be incredibly honest when they think just the peers who know what's up is listening. The easiest example of this is the nature...
You mean academics like talk amongst themselves in their given field very differently from how they approach talking to someone who doesn't know dick from shit in like the wild? That's crazy. I never would have guessed that.
Versus nurture debate. The blue pill era was entirely predicated upon the idea that nurture was the complete determinant value while nature is irrelevant. The thing is that when we actually studied this, we found that it was completely incorrect. Strangely enough, the vast majority of human traits tend to cluster around being half genetic, and we think intelligence might be even more genetic, between 2/3 to 80%. Other traits that are at least partially genetic are levels of...
Oh, we're going into the eugenicism. Okay.
Religiosity, charisma, what music you listen to, how fast you drive, and a variety of almost everything else.
Yeah, again, this is eugenicist. I wanted to go with like tripe, I think. I think that's the word I was going for.
At this point, even legitimate socialists like Sapolsky, Catherine Hardin, John Haidt, amongst all...
Some books written by leftist academics about how genetics drives human differences. Haidt started out as left, but becomes center. Which is why, by the way, I need to read this book. I actually bought The Righteous Mind so that I could do a takedown of Jonathan Haidt. I just haven't had the time to get around to like finishing it. But yeah, it's one of the reasons why I find him a sussy little baka.
others agree that human nature is heavily genetic. I have read multiple books written by socialists about trying to rationalize the new genetic evidence within a socialist framework. We've found this partly through twin studies, in which we look at genetically identical twins separated at birth. They often have chilling similarities, like marrying men with the
intelligence is
same
genetic,
names,
how
having
did
the
Fred
same
Trump
kind
end
of
up with
dog.
his son being borderline non-functional?
Fred Trump wasn't the smartest guy either. Socket Dinner, thank you for the 2 tier 1 subs. Appreciate it. Zia Spots, thank you for the $5
He forgets
dono.
that predators have low success rates generally and that both predator and prey animals thrive when living in a community.
Also, I Can't Video Game, thank you for subscribing over on Twitch. I appreciate that very, very much.
No clever message, I am tired.
Or going to vacation at the same places and a bunch of other stuff like that. At this point, genetics is completely irrefutable, and the evidence is getting stronger by the day. The genetic differences between men and women, between race.
Okay. So I haven't seen this map before, but I can tell you that I see at least one racial slur on here already off the bat. Cool. Another one of his very fun maps. Anyway, don't say this word. Don't say this one. I'm too white to say that word. If you are white or close to white like I am, don't say that word. What the fuck is in the American Southeast? Africans. That's how he thinks this all works out. Cool. Yep.
No, the studies that are referenced in the bell curve prove the opposite. The authors used secondary sources that lied about the results.
Okay, wait, I thought one of these books that he showed on screen was the bell curve. Okay, my bad.
All say that biological race and class has been irrefutably proven at this point, and again, every year we realize more of what we
again, biological class is not at all a thing.
Thought was cultural conditioning was really genetic. We have significant scientific evidence that men and women are neurologically different on a genetic basis. This is something all of the science agrees with. Well, it completely...
I don't think that's true at all. I think there's been 1, maybe 2 studies on this.
Contradicts our society's right to rule. The genetic data is a ticking time bomb, in my opinion, given it's become the new scientific consensus, and the old ruling class can only have so much time before this information percolates across the whole society. Twitter has become a huge vehicle in spreading this sort of illicit information.
Twitter, it's radicalizing us by teaching us that that eugenics is true. You're right. To clarify what he's beginning to sketch out here is that this idea that class is based on your genetics, right, is an idea that he's saying is just now spreading across society and will soon be picked up by the ruling elites. And then they will found kind of those bloodline-based communities in order to pass along their class genes. It's that again, it connects with one of that Hop guy we looked at earlier, right? These kind of kin-based communities. And what he's saying is that eventually the ruling elite of America are going to catch on that their progeny are also destined to be better than everyone in class, as well as race, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they will need to be the rulers. And, if everyone catches on, then the oppressed classes will rise up and kill them, you see. That's literally where he's going with this, right? And so, understand this is, I believe, why Elon Musk really liked this video. Because Elon Musk believes that, his progeny are God seed, that they are essentially seeding the earth with his super powered genes, and that by doing so he will save the planet with the amount of class he's spreading. This idea is attractive to the richest, hollowest dipshits.
Our entire society is built in opposition to this, and thus it has...
Also, it couldn't possibly be that just generational wealth transfer in America in particular makes class mobility very difficult, if not impossible, for some people. And so, It must be something else. It must be the genetics.
Mass political ramifications. The other worry is that wokeness has given a large part of the population immense resentment over racial.
Oh, buddy. Buddy. No, buddy. Oh, why are you posting the cell phone? I often get mocked for spending a lot of time on Twitter, but I legit think that Twitter is the place where the new right will form intellectually in a manner comparable to how cafes formed during the
Rudyard
French...
has so blatantly the right side of this classic meme.
I need to finish reading this before I look at that meme, but I will do it, man, at the Yahoo. Thank you for the $5 dono. Comparable to how cafes formed the French and Russian revolutions, Twitter is now a place of raw creativity and openness. Spaces like that have to create something new. Call me chronically online, but that's where this is happening. Fuck, man. You have no idea how fucking cooked and owned you are by that statement. Jesus Christ. Truly, you are part of the Parisian resistance, going to your little coffee shop with your Twitter app on your smartphone, twirling a mustache as you sip a cold, hard energy drink, settling in for another hard day's labor of posting. Oh, God. Jesus Christ. All right, what is this? Use the right-hand side of this meme. You want to know more? Awesome. What do you want to educate me? What do you want me to educate you about first? Do you want to know about scientific arguments for racism? Wait, let me give my rape statistics. The SJWs have infiltrated the media and academia, so I'm the only educator you can trust. I will teach you everything. This is literally Whatifalthist in picture form. It's true. That's a good, it's a good likeness too.
Or sexual agendas. Thus, the info coming out that there are significant racial and sexual differences creates immense fodder for a new wave of sexism or racism. My biggest fear for modernity is what I call the closed loop, or
the Parisian resistance to the storming of the Bastille, the Russian resistance to the elimination of the Tsarist line. Lover is favorite flavor, indeed. The closed loop. The closed loop is a philosophic concept I developed. You didn't develop the concept of a fucking closed loop, you Nimrod. Jesus. I developed that one can make an argument where you're right by definition, and any information that could disprove said thesis has a logical rebuttal inside the system's thought. This is a major flaw of modern thinking, with Marxism, Freud, the Nazis, and scientism all being guilty of this. This allows the rationalization of anything. This is modernity's biggest philosophic flaw. What are you talking about? Like, genuinely, I want you to elaborate on what this means in any given one of those concepts. Okay? You know what? Demonstrate how it's true in Marxism. I would love to hear that.
Making a logical argument in which you're right by definition. On top of this, confusing the finger pointing at the moon for the moon itself, which is using a definition to argue that you're right by definition. It's not an uncommon sentiment on the dissident right today to make a
I'm sorry. Maybe I'm having a stroke right now. Maybe I'm having a fucking stroke right now. So we're at 1919, okay? We're at night.
It's normally used. When I say pseudoscience, I don't mean this as the political attack it's normally used at, but rather from the actual scientific definition.
Anyway, go on.
Common sentiment on the dissident right today to make a racial caste system based off race and IQ. I don't trust this sort of thing, since every time in the past we've tried to form a technocratic society based off science, the science later turned out to be wrong or missing a very important piece of context.
Yeah, it's almost like that's the science is. It's almost like science is the scientific method, a way by which we can better understand the world, and not in fact an end-all be-all in and of itself. It is a method of arriving at a relatively consistent truth, not the end-all be-all itself. So maybe you shouldn't use that as like the basis for your society.
What would happen is that after society was structured in a certain way like that decades later, it would turn out the science was completely wrong in a very important way. I think.
Yeah, that's why you change your approach based on the new data.
I think a lot of this discourse is being done in a frankly very evil way, and that it's not taking into account humility or the fallibility of the human condition. When the left or a lot of the right debates, they're arguing out of this sense of humanity as a perfect creature who
I'm sorry, why are you showing a mass production line of sex robots? What the fuck?
we engineer towards utopia. But we've learned in the 20th century that this sort of line of thinking will inevitably result in totalitarianism, no matter how it's applied. And when I look at a lot of this discourse about race or sex, I'm thinking, you guys don't see how the next immediate conclusion of this idea is something completely evil. And it's a hard point to convey.
Oh no, he's not an incel, guys. We know from his mushroom trips that he's gotten laid before, okay? And that he's very good with the ladies, allegedly.
Because modernity can't think in anything except pretty autistic, binary, logical ideas without...
Yeah, you don't really get the high ground there to call anyone else autistic, bud. Sorry.
The necessary flexibility or synthetic thinking which the real complex world demands. And we really need a tremendous amount of mental flexibility and disarmament in this kind of discourse.
You know what this is like? This is like if you got one of the Star Trek like science gobbledygook writers and got them to sit down and you told them, okay, you're a fascist. Tell me how your fascist society works, but you can only use the meaningless science jargon that you've picked up from Star Trek. That's basically what we're getting here, right?
That we just don't have. And until we can move to that point,
intentions matter more than we think. If your real aim is power and control over others, then every word that comes out of your mouth will be warped by said intention. If you actually do want to help and learn, then you can tackle very difficult topics with humanity and flexibility. I believe the line is between dealing with people as people to empathize with versus inanimate objects to manipulate. Yeah.
All of this discourse will end in complete disaster. At this,
it's true. Most people have a left brain and a right brain. Rudyard doesn't have either. Instead, he has a Dunning brain and a Kruger brain. It's a wild feat of biological reality, but it happened.
At this point, to change topic, we have a tremendous amount of scientific study that men and women are markedly different. Men are less agreeable and neurotic than women. Men also systematize and women sympathize. Men care about things and women care about people. I want to use this as an example because saying men and women are the...
Wait, I'm sorry, women care about people? Wait, I believe the line is between dealing with people as people to empathize with versus inanimate objects to manipulate. Huh. So... Are you a woman, Rudyard? You're definite. Okay, all right, whatever.
Things and women care about people. I want to use this as an example because
it wouldn't be the first. It wouldn't be the first time a fascist, turned into an egg.
Saying men and women are the same is the thing the pre-industrial world would probably boggle at the most because they would see it as completely insane. And the fact that the blue pill era was able to get people to stand behind this point is a pretty good example to figure out how they argue. With this discourse, there was basically no research to determine whether or not men and women were the same. Instead, they used the argument from definition. The argument from definition is how the blue pill era was able to
the argument for the gender relativism. 1, there are cultural stereotypes around gender. 2, that makes them a cultural construct. 3, cultural constructs are things we invented. 4, thus, since we invented it, we can change it at will. 5, thus, reality doesn't really exist. Okay, well, number 1, cultural constructs are a product of the culture. Literally, you can look at different points in history where it meant different things to be a man, sometimes contradictory things to be a man. One era would say men wear high heels. Another era would say women, men don't wear high heels. And it would be like the epitome of man. The most macho of men wear makeup. The most macho of men don't wear makeup. And like these are cultural constructs. Like that's just a fact. That is a fact of existing within a society. Cultural constructs are things we invented. It's true. Collectively, we decided that's masculine, that's feminine. And then like over time it changes. 60 years ago, it was masculine for women to wear pants.
Isn't just incest?
Yes. Thank you for the 2 tier 1 subs. I think he's adding on that last part of reality not really existing, though. I haven't ever heard any trans people argue that because gender is a construct, reality doesn't exist. I haven't. That's a new one to me.
Easily get the population to believe complete absurdities. In that, for race or sex as an example, the logical structure of this argument is that race or sex have social constructions built around.
Where does this actually reference human biology or studies of how genders operate? Literally, the anthropological books that you turn your nose up at would talk about how genders operate. You just didn't like the books and what they said, so you ignored them.
Thus, they are social constructs, and thus they aren't real. For example, there are social ideas about the sun.
Wait, no. Cultural, like social constructs are real. The same way money is real, but like money on its own is just a pile of paper. It doesn't have any significance on its own. It's just within our society that money has utility and power through said utility, and that utility is created by the fact that we all agree it's worth something, right? And similarly, like that's a real system, but it's a social construct. The conservative idea that social constructs don't exist is the one that doesn't make any sense. Like that's the leap that conservatives make that, again, other people don't.
Thus, the sun is a social construct, and thus we could get rid of the sun if we wanted.
No, it's not at all comparable to that. You're the one saying that like, oh, well, social constructs aren't real. It's like, no, they're real. You can just change a social construct by changing society. You can do that. That happens naturally on its own all the time. Again, a good example is women in pants. 60, 70 years ago, socially unacceptable for women to wear pants. They started wearing pants. Now it's totally fine for women to wear pants. That is a part of the social construct changing.
This is exactly the intellectual structure they use. It's a really bizarre...
It's not.
Our logical game that doesn't actually make any sense, in that the underlying reality of the universe is that the world is real. If you don't do what the universe wants you to do, it then punishes you, which is why we all work jobs and do things we dislike every day.
What are you talking about? The universe doesn't punish you for not going to your job. The system of capitalism does. Like if you don't go to your 9-to-5 job, you're going to get fired. That's not the universe punishing you. That's your employer punishing you for not contributing to the company profits.
Life is a struggle. I've taken a course in gender studies and literally studied this topic myself.
I took a course in gender studies. One course.
And this is literally what postmodernist philosophy publicly says. The problem is that
if that was your takeaway from the course, you failed that course.
This is just legitimately completely insane, and I think we all really know that. I think this is the philosophic equivalent of a shit test, or the left is pushing something completely ridiculous.
There's a story from ancient China that an emperor forced his retainers to say that a deer was a horse. He killed anyone who disagreed, so they all agreed. This is my read on a lot of the trans and other similar discourse. We all really know in the bottom of our souls that this is complete bullshit, but it's a power game to see if you can break the public's will to get them to believe in absurdity. Again, it's not at all the same. We change things like whether or not pants are considered masculine or feminine. Women wear pants all the time now. 70 years ago, it was considered a masculine thing. You could literally be arrested if you were a woman and you were wearing pants, you know? Cities had laws requiring different gendered pieces of clothing. Like, I'm not being hyperbolic here, that was enforced by law in some places. Under pain of imprisonment or fines. That enforcement was real. Despite that, the culture changed anyway. The social construct of what it means to be a woman expanded to include pants. Women can wear pants now. Wow, you know? It's this idea that like, but they all agreed. And, you know, they called a deer a horse, but it wasn't really a horse. We all know deep down that it's really a horse. And it's like, well, I don't know. That's like arguing we all know deep down that women wearing pants is wrong because the pants are masculine, really. But that's no one thinks that because my example is actually demonstrative and his example is not.
That we all know is completely ridiculous, and they're doing it as a power game to see how much they can get the population to submit to a legitimate absurdity. The next mental trick the blue pill involves is that studying history is of no use.
Yeah, exactly. The Stonewall riot was originally because of gendered clothing laws. Exactly. It was part of the justification to clamp down on like homosexual behavior. You know, like it was an extension of going after men who sat on like park benches at night.
For the world today, in that we're so different from the past that nothing in the past is a useful precedent for us now. Again, this is something they never tested or even provided an argument for. I've never seen a valid argument for this, but it's completely taken over academia in that there are basically no Western academics who have tried to use the patterns of history to study the world since the World War II era. In academia,
yeah, because maybe patterns of history isn't an actually useful concept to understand civilizations, because civilizations are pretty complicated, and oversimplifying like their rise and fall can lead you to overly simplistic answers that actually aren't helpful to understanding their circumstance.
Academia, it's literally against their policies to use books written before, let's say, 1990, since
it's not against school policy to use books written before 1990. I literally went to college, 12 years ago now, but like I read books that were like over a century old. Yeah, like that's just a lie.
They're outdated. This creates a system where insane new ideas can never be falsified. What I like to say is that if you're not using history to understand the world, you're just making stuff up.
Yeah, some people might be making stuff up. It's true. It's very, very true. Some people might be making stuff up.
What happened where instead of a legitimate study,
I'm going to do ayahuasca in the woods so I can astral project myself and give Whatifalthist soul a wet willy. Oh, Nosebleed, thank you for the $5 super chat. I enjoyed that a lot.
What the blue pill era did was project the
criminal justice and sociology major here. In my independent study, I would regularly cite sources over 80 years old. Yep.
Fantasies they wanted to believe onto the social sciences.
Oh man, I should really watch The Woman King, because genuinely conservatives got so fucking triggered by it.
He said it. No more Bible reading at school.
Yeah, no more Bible reading at school. The Bible, that's too old. You need to be reading what's a new book? All of the new books that come to mind are not appropriate for this example. You know what? Let's just break this up a little bit. Here, let's just take a look at the trailer for The Woman King, because I think it looks cool. This is what he's really mad about, by the way.
An evil is coming that threatens our kingdom, our freedom. But we have a weapon they are not prepared for.
The Europeans wish to conquer us. They will not stop until the whole of Africa is theirs. We must fight back for our people.
Aneska, you are asking me to take them to war. War.
Some things are worth fighting for.
Don't know. Take my power, my power. Don't know. Take my power.
You are called to join the King's Guard.
Don't know. Take my power.
No kingdom in all of Africa shares this privilege. Train hard, fight harder.
Wonder if he'd have the same complaints if it was Wu Zetian?
Probably, maybe not. With this is gonna sound terrible to say, but for this racist with Asians, it's a coin flip. Like he will either think it's the it's the coolest thing ever, or like literal garbage, not even worth mentioning. It's a coin flip. The racism can go either way for people like Whatifalthist. Thank you for the 2 tier 1 subs, Sake Tanuki.
We fear no one. And we fear no pain. I offer you a choice. Fight or we die.
Ready for war, where you going?
To be a warrior, you must kill your tears.
We are the spear of victory! We are the blade of freedom! We are the home! Don't know, take my power, my power, my power. Don't know, take my power, my power.
I just think that looks badass. I think that looks neat. Not a lot of movies being told from that perspective, I don't know, looks woke. I mean, that's probably his issue with it, Like that's why he's apropos of nothing throwing in a screenshot from the movie.
Thus, they believed that cultural or anthropological differences don't matter anymore, since that contradicted the leftist ideal of the whole world moving toward a unified communist state. It's
what? Leftists can't even agree on what communism is. What are you talking about?
remarkable to see that even studying anthropology has become socially taboo. If I want to read books on the cultural differences between the Chinese, Indian, and Western civilization, I need to read books at least 70 years old, since
anything published in the last 70 years couldn't possibly be right. Oh, God. I feel like this movie would have been Fire with a White Man as the lead instead. Oh, fuck. You guys are funny.
Nothing has been written on that topic since then. At the same time, there are no recent books on the anthropology of America.
Yeah, man. That's definitely yup. You nailed that map, man. So true, King. You know, not enough people talk about the Northern Ireland Empire inside of the United States. You know, too many people talk about, and no one's talking about the secret Irish infiltration of America. or the secret colony, the secret Scottish colony of America. Not to mention the inexplicable Nigeria portion. I just, seriously, if you're, this is a very long video. Obviously, I know it's a very long video, but if you are conservative and you manage to make it this far into this video, I want you to take a good, hard look at this map, and I want you to try and explain to me how this is not horse shit. I want you to explain to me how this is at all correct. At all. I would love to know. Oh, God. This man's stupid as fuck.
They basically had to rediscover the field of the entirety of American ethnic breakdown, since no authors had covered the topic recently, with
And by finding out the field of the American ethnic breakdown, of course, we also need to find out the breakdown of the American skull shape.
the exceptions being conservatives like Thomas Sowell or David Hackett Fisher. This is important stuff. Whether or not Wisconsin is German or Missouri is Anglo determines how people live their lives.
Oh, sorry, of course, we have Thomas Sowell, of course.
Map men. Map men. Map men.
Map men to that that tune. Saki Tanuki, thank you for the 2 tier 1 subs. I had to Doug do it to him.
Wisconsin is German or Missouri is Anglo determines how people live their lives today and their identities. The reason studying anthropology, which should be
Oh man, I forgot about this map. Yeah, some good stuff here.
completely innocuous, is taboo since it
At some point in the future, he replaces Northeast and Utah with just Mormon.
contradicts the left's faith-based argument for global unity. If the historic
Again, I don't know what he's talking about when he's talking about the left's goal of global unity.
precedent isn't useful, it opens up to the injection of leftist faith-based arguments, such as progress being innate or progress just natural.
Wait, if progress is fucking innate, man, then why would someone have to do an election on progress? Running on hope and like if leftists believe it's innate, then you wouldn't need to run an election on the idea of okay.
Leftist faith-based arguments, such as progress being innate or progress just naturally happens and doesn't require incentives to occur. This is an idea from Hegel or Marx that wasn't tested. Same thing with the
From Hegel or Marx, do not know where the idea you're saying exists comes from, because I don't think it comes from either of those two guys, actually.
honest studying of war as a natural part of the human condition, alongside equality being good for its own sake. In each case, by removing the historic reference, they were able to inject their religion as the dominant assumption. One of the more primal areas
What religion?
where the science doesn't lead to our current paradigm is that our current vision of the world is that society is based off the mechanistic, pure materialist worldview. In general, we exist in a strange zombie culture in which the society has a 100+ year lag from the science itself. The great irony is that modern physics sounds a lot like the traditional philosophy of magic.
No, it fucking doesn't, actually. You think Merlin's rolling up to the goddamn quantum physics convention? No.
Entanglement sounds a lot like the law of sympathy, or a magic principle from the Middle Ages that the
It's not at all.
universe has these strings connecting different parts of the universe. Modern physics is insane, with space and time being the same, which can rip apart. With chaos theory, we've found that we can't predict the movement of particles, since it's almost as if the particles are making a decision in real time that we're not privy to.
Exactly, Mr. Malachite. It does sound like that if you're a moron and don't know anything about it. That is very true. I'm so scared that we have to worry about this fucker even more now, thanks Elon. Exactly. I love how he follows up calling leftism faith-based while diving into magic is real, man. Yeah, I love when he starts talking. Actually, let me put it this way. Unironically, I love when he starts talking about how, like, well, technically the ancient magicians were onto something with things like the law of sympathy. Because, it gets us a little bit closer to the very real possibility that this guy starts embracing alchemy as a concept and begins drinking like mercury, Like we're getting closer every day to the universe in which Rudyard decides to just fully embrace alchemy as a concept because it's quantum physics and drinks straight mercury.
Space and time aren't the same thing. There is one thing, it's called space-time. As someone who has derived the Schrödinger and Einstein field equations, OWW.
Yeah, there's an entire PBS show about this called Space Time, and I would highly recommend it. Often It does go over my head, but it is very fascinating when I can understand it. Sake Tanuki, thank you for the 2 tier 1 subs.
Some particles go back in time and others just jump in and
Oh god, Jack is right. He's gonna start dosing on colloidal silver and slowly die. I mean, you know I'm right? Like he's gonna start like snorting some kind of like I don't know, mica based powder or something. Like it's gonna be like daggers in his brain.
out of existence. There's a significant amount of scientific evidence that consciousness affects reality. The last Nobel Prize in Physics says that reality is not locally real, or that the universe does not exist independently from perception.
I don't think he understands what that means. Like, I genuinely don't think he understands what that means.
This is stuff pretty similar to what the esoteric schools of world religions taught. Any honest physicist will admit
I don't really understand physics, to be honest. Yeah, we got that, bud. Yeah, we picked up on that. Don't worry.
that we have basically no idea what's going on. Our society is philosophically still stuck with Marxist materialism, or the philosophy of 200 years ago that the universe is made up entirely of physical atoms. Ideas don't really matter, and the only thing that drives history is economics, which leads us to progress.
Colloidal silver doesn't kill you. It does if you start regularly dosing on it to a harmful degree.
Again, this is another example of the left pushing what's a Marxist, faith-based argument that they never tested. Scientists today agree that consciousness is real and can affect the world. Thus, the world cannot be purely materialist by definition. This materialist vision of the world is...
That's really, really stupid. You know, you can't just say, like, well, I don't actually understand physics at all, by the way, and then try and make arguments like this. That's not...
It doesn't kill you. You're blue da ba dee da ba die.
Sake Tanuki, thank you for the 2 tier 1 subs. That's the issue, right? Like, Curly Dorothy, you're very correct, right? That, you know, But this guy, while consciousness is grounded in the material world, this guy rejects that idea and thinks that consciousness is akin to the soul, right? And so, like, this guy doesn't think that consciousness is a physical phenomena. He thinks it is a spiritual one, right? And that leads him to mashing that understanding together with his incomplete and absolutely batshit understanding of physics.
Is predicated upon a warped version of Newtonian physics, which has also been dethroned over a century ago. Our philosophic view of the human condition is dominated by Skinner's behaviorism and rational choice theory. This is an idea that humans don't have innate nature and that dopamine incentives craft everything. Rational choice theory is that humans are innately rational and thus choose whichever choice is better for them economically.
That's not true, like, demonstrably about humans.
Science has consistently shown recently is that humans are basically monkeys. Human behavior is a reflection.
We are great apes. That's true. We are in that scientific classification.
Of primate behavior to our very core. How humans have politics, wage war, mate, make art, have friendships, and almost anything else can be found in our ape relatives. This gets to a really scary degree where human rituals like hugging or saluting or certain ways we mate or show political subservience can all be found in chimps, gorillas, or bonobos. Humans aren't the little robots that respond to stimuli that our society thinks, but huge, very complex beings who have subconsciouses who go very deep. The subconscious makes up something like 90% of our mental power. We've found in studies the two things that make people the happiest aren't wealth, but instead religion and community. The human mind, evolutionary.
Yeah, you know, it couldn't be that religion has a built-in community. It couldn't be that the second thing you said there was actually the most important one, which is that we are social creatures, and what makes us happy is being able to live in a harmonious community with one another. It has, you know, you have to have the religion there, otherwise you couldn't possibly have that second thing, apparently.
Massively wires us towards love being a huge priority.
How can we return to monk when we're already monk?
Thank you for the 2 tier 1 subs. Well, you gotta put your monk in your monk, obviously.
Love is a physiological need for humans and all other mammals. Without it, our brains and bodies...
I want to be one of those winter hot spring monkeys. I want to be one of those winter hot spring monkeys that like learns how to use a samurai sword, like in Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice.
literally start to wither away. This is in direct opposition to how modernity is structured to prioritize material against the spiritual or social. Humans are motivated enormously by sex, more so than money. Expecting humans to be rational about sex is like expecting a dog to be rational about steak. This is taking a turn. Anytime he starts talking about sex, I get really nervous for where this is going to go. Also, just so you know, if you train a dog to know that it shouldn't eat a steak off the table,
oh no,
it won't.
Macaques out.
Sake Tanuki, thank you for the 2 tier 1 subs. Jesus Christ.
This is another thing modernity gets wrong. You'll never see a history book talk about sexual, physical, psychological, or emotional needs, but we know that those drive human nature to its most profound core. Humans are controlled by vast subconscious forces that account for 90% of the population.
Yeah, but also they're subconscious. That's why you usually don't find history books talking about those things unless it's based on inferences you can make from the sources available to you at that time, right? Like, in a lot of cases, you just don't have enough data to try and make any definitive statement about those things because they're internal. Right?
For 90% of people, they rationalize whatever their emotional state is. Only around 10% of the population makes rational decisions.
Citation needed.
Humans are self-interested, but we're rarely rational. From studies, people make a decision first for subconscious reasons, and then their conscious mind is a tool to rationalize the choice to make them look good to others. The book, The Elephant in the Brain, talks about this, and it's one of the best anthropology books I've read. All of this completely flies in the face of the idea which underlies our society, that human nature is naturally good or perfectible. The science
Again, human nature is to live in community. We are social creatures. The social element of our existence is demonstrable throughout all of our history, and it is what allows us, in turn, to build civilization. If we were not social creatures, we would not build civilization. We would not build complex communities.
Finds humanity is very, very flawed. An example of this, and one of the most absurd lies of the Blue Pill era, is that tribal peoples are peaceful. This is especially...
No one thinks that? Literally no one thinks that. Hello, Audie Plays. So, like, I just to clarify, no, like, I don't know anyone, and maybe this is because I studied military, like medieval military history in college, okay? But genuinely nobody thought that, like, oh, you know, people in the far past were peaceful, man. Like, that's, actually, wait a minute. It makes a lot more sense that he would think that, given that he only reads history books that are like 70 years old. Because if you're reading books that are 70 years old, you're not really getting the pushback against noble savage stereotypes, right? You're just getting those stereotypes regurgitated at you. So if he's only reading older books, he's not encountering the criticism of that idea, which is a newer phenomenon. God, I hate this guy.
Actually ridiculous to me in that all the European and other peoples with...
The plot of this video is the greatest lie ever told, and we still haven't gotten to what the greatest one is yet.
Records who arrived at any given tribal area said that the peoples there waged war. However, the left had an active conspiracy to hide that tribal peoples are violent, hierarchical, misogynistic, and other things.
No, actually, that would no, actually, at all. They're human beings. They could be just as flawed as anyone else.
Fascinating how the black caveman made sure you could see his 8-pack by not wearing anything like the other cavemen.
Oh, Sake Tanuki, thank you for the 2 tier 1 subs. When are you going to interview him? Do you think this man would be capable of having a conversation about anything? Do you think this man would be capable of actually withstanding any amount of, like, questioning of his ideas in a way that is, like, actually coherent? Absolutely not. This man's incapable of having an actual conversation with someone.
The degree of lying that went on here is extraordinary. The left claimed for decades that the Yanomami peoples of the Amazon were peaceful. In reality,
I'm sorry, what the fuck is this?
Claimed for decades that the Yanomami peoples of the Amazon were peaceful. In reality, 40% of the male population dies every generation in war, making the Yanomami one of the most violent peoples ever known in human history. Similar lies took place over of the most violent peoples ever known in human history.
Why is this guy here? I want to know the circumstances of this photograph. Did this guy go and like fight them?
History. Similar lies took
first scale. Gotcha.
place over a variety of peoples, and in most cases, in tribal groups between 40 to 20%.
I'm sorry you keep coming in while we're covering this guy. I'll try and stop.
Of young men die each generation in warfare. Humans, like all animals, are stuck in a brutal Darwinistic competition for survival, in
yeah, that's true.
which violence is the norm, not the exception.
Except that there's a big difference between like war waged between one tribe and another and war waged by an industrialized superpower and another country.
One of the best anthropology books I've ever read is Lawrence Keeley's book, War Before Civilization, which covers this. It's such a good book, given it goes through the evidence of tribal warfare from both current anthropology and archaeology. In so many places, the left got caught with a completely ridiculous lie. For example, saying the Mayans were peaceful, while the reality, when we started looking at
I don't think anyone ever said that. The Mayan Empire, like the Mayans had an empire. They're like, if it's an empire, then it's definitionally not.
Maya art is it's mostly about war, sacrifice, and genocide. They said Native Americans were peaceful before European contact, and then
no one has said that. They just weren't genociding each other, generally speaking. They just didn't wipe out 90% of all the other people on the continent.
We find archaeology of mass Native American genocides and mass graves of hundreds of dead people. They said that the Native Americans were peaceful before European contact, and then we find records in archaeology.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between like 100 dead here and there in isolated incidents across vast swaths of time and the sudden eradication of like 90+% of all human civilization on the continent as a result of like the colonization. Like, I think there's a big difference there, right? I think we could all agree that there's probably a big difference there.
Of mass Native American genocides, burning cities, and mass graves of hundreds of dead soldiers. When I was in elementary school around age 10, my school textbook said that the Iroquois were peaceful. The insanity of that is that the Iroquois a 1,000-mile stretch of the American Midwest from Buffalo to St. Louis in order to take the beaver pelts of that area. That's legitimately insane. At this point, I've seen...
Yeah. That's the insane part, not the mass genocide of of almost all the indigenous people on the continent by the colonizers.
Seen the left lie so massively on a variety of topics that I have literally no faith
when all your
in
knowledge
any
of indigenous people comes from the Savages song from Pocahontas.
Genuinely, it is just there's did you know that indigenous people could be bad sometimes? Did you know that sometimes indigenous people did things that were not good? And it's like, yeah, we did, actually. We understand them as human beings, you know? Like, I just I don't know. What's weird is that like there's a lot of stuff going around here, right? Where like one of the things he talked about there, right, is the Iroquois. Now, another way of talking about the Iroquois is the Iroquois Confederacy or Confederation, because it was actually the name of a group of different nations. It was actually 5 and then eventually grew to 6. And so understand that like when he's talking about this, there's a lot going on there beyond oh, well, they just genocided people for beaver pelts. No, not really. Not really. a lot of it is driven by like the colonization of the area, the driving out of these different peoples, and like pushing them out of different areas. However, like the actual founding of the Confederacy is hotly debated. Some people say it's like, oh, it happened in like the 1660, and other people are like, well, actually, it happened, 500 years earlier. So like, who knows? It just is one of those things where like his recollection of events is not exactly correct.
Things they say. An example of this is when they found the genetics of the first inhabitants of Britain, the scientists said they were black. The reality is that they had copper skin like most modern Mediterraneans, but they changed this to be black to mess with racists. 23andMe openly admitted to adding fake black ancestry to the results of white supremacist figures to mess with them. The left
I'm just going to look up something real quick. I'm trying to find this particular website because that sounds fake. Oh, that's so interesting. Because I looked for this website and I can't find it. And wouldn't you know it? And I didn't pre-watch, so I literally just found it Googling in 5 seconds. Did DNA testing companies admit to altering tests to screw with racists? Mostly false. An anonymous purported employee of an unnamed DNA testing company claimed that on 2 occasions less than 1% African ancestry was added to testing results, typically when their findings totaled under 100%. What's false? DNA testing companies made no such admission. The claim was sourced from one anonymous worker and published on a humor site. Even the worker indicated purported meddling was unusual. That's so interesting. Published on Chicks on the Right? The specific claim originated on the website Squawker. Here, let's take a look at Squawker. Man, he had to go back to literal Wayback Machine to get this article because you can't actually access it anymore. In a recent interview with Cracked, a comedy website.
There must be a reason it says have genetics that trace back to Africa, evolution. Nah, must be aliens and lies.
Yeah, so it's interesting that he's showing this article and not, in fact, Cracked. Cool. Thanks, bud.
Left feels literally no remorse for lying and has been caught on records doing it dozens of times.
Yeah, that's why I'm citing this interview from a comedy magazine.
Need I remind you, back in the 1940s, the left tried to suppress any information about the atrocities coming out of Stalin or Mao's countries. And
literally in the 1940s, we were already in the Cold War.
And leftist anthropology believed that we all migrated out of Africa 50,000 years ago, and then there was no prehistoric migrations or major wars. And that's just legitimately ridiculous to think.
What are you talking about? Yep, no wars. Yet no one thinks this.
That for all of human history before the rise of the Europeans, everyone stood in their little place and no one fought each other or moved around. And once
that's literally not what the mass migration out of Africa was. What are you talking? Yeah, it all went fine. We just packed up our things and moved around the planet. No, hunky-dory. What the fuck are you talking about, man?
Once genetics results came out over the 21st century, we realized that that's completely ridiculous, where genocide and war is the norm, where, for example, Ice Age Europe was genocided 7 times over. Another really jarring...
By whom? What are you talking about? Provide any citations for what you are saying.
Example of this is that the most popular anthropology book of the 20th century, that being Margaret Mead's Coming of Age in Samoa. Margaret has later turned out to be a CIA asset, a theme which we'll tease out later, but she wrote about Samoa being a sexually liberated paradise. Samoans would sleep around without jealousy. The reality, and something that we knew for over a century up to that point, is that Samoa was the opposite, a society obsessed with sexual purity. A woman's would be publicly checked on her wedding night to attest to her virginity. Adulterers would be publicly clubbed to death. Margaret Mead was basically openly lying, something she probably knew and didn't care. For the final 2 examples of horror...
I think this guy might have a problem with women.
Crack pipe intensifying.
And no kidding, I've forgotten to take a hit. It's, oh God. It does take off the sting. I promise. It does help. Real quick here. She knew she was probably lying and didn't care. Okay, like, I mean, that would obviously be a pretty huge controversy, right? Let's take a look. Okay, after her death, Mead's Samoan research was criticized by the anthropologist Derek Freeman, who published a book arguing against many of Mead's conclusions in Coming of Age in Samoa. Freeman argued that Mead had misunderstood Samoan culture when she argued that Samoan culture did not place many restrictions on youth's sexual explorations. Freeman argued instead that Samoan culture prized female chastity and virginity, and that Mead had been misled by her female Samoan informants. Freeman found that the Samoan Islanders, whom Mead had depicted in such utopian terms, were intensely competitive and had murder and rape rates higher than those in the United States. Furthermore, the men were intensely sexually jealous, which contrasted sharply with Mead's depiction of free love among the Samoans. Freeman's book was controversial in its turn and was met with considerable backlash and harsh criticism from the anthropology community, but it was received enthusiastically by communities of scientists who believed that sexual mores were more or less universal across cultures. Later in 1983, a special session of Mead supporters in the American Anthropological Association, to which Freeman was not invited, declared it to be poorly written, unscientific, irresponsible, and misleading. Some anthropologists who studied Samoan culture argued in favor of Freeman's findings and contradicted those of Mead, but others argued that Freeman's work did not invalidate Mead's work because Samoan culture had been changed by the integration of Christianity in the decades between Mead's and Freeman's fieldwork periods. Eleanor Leacock traveled to Samoa in 1985 and undertook research among the youth living in urban areas. The research results indicated that the assertions of Derek Freeman were seriously flawed. Leacock pointed out that Mead's famous Samoan fieldwork was undertaken on an outer island that had not been colonized. Freeman, meanwhile, had undertaken fieldwork in an urban slum plagued by drug abuse, structural unemployment, and gang violence. That's so weird that, you know, maybe he should have looked into that like a little bit more, you know? It's kind of weird that that's kind of weird, right? Like leaving that important context out. Let's see. In 1996, the author Martin Orens examined Mead's notes preserved at the Library of Congress and credits her for leaving all of her recorded data available to the general public. Orens points out that Freeman's basic criticisms that Mead was duped by ceremonial virgin Fa'apua Fa'amu, who later swore to Freeman that she had played a joke on Mead, were equivocal for several reasons. Mead was well aware of the forms and frequency of Samoan joking. She provided a careful account of the sexual restrictions on ceremonial virgins that corresponds with Fa'amua's count to Freeman, and Mead's notes make clear that she had reached her conclusions about Samoan sexuality before meeting Fa'amu. And Orens points out that Mead's data supports several different conclusions, and that Mead's conclusions hinge on an interpretive rather than a positivist approach to culture. Orens went on to point out concerning Mead's work elsewhere that her own notes do not support her published conclusive claims. Evaluating Mead's work in Samoa from a positive stance, Orens' assessment of the controversy was that Mead did not formulate her research agenda in scientific terms, and that her work may properly be damned with the harshest scientific criticism of all, that it is not even wrong. Damn. On the whole, anthropologists have rejected the notion that Mead's conclusion rested on the validity of a single interview with a single person, and find instead that Mead based her conclusions on the sum of her observations and interviews during her time in Samoa, and that the status of the single interview did not falsify her work. Others, such as Orens, maintained that even though Freeman's critique was invalid, Mead's study was not sufficiently scientifically rigorous to support the conclusions she drew. Which, like, that seems like a fair conclusion there, right? And I guess this Freeman guy got so butthurt that he wrote a second book about this entire issue. Cool stuff.
Horrible lies which personally affected me as a child. The first is that when I went to school, they taught us in class that the healthiest food to eat was carbohydrates and that lean meat was the least healthy. They also said that fat was the main cause for obesity, while sugar was fine. It later turned out that the sugar and wheat industries were in bed with the US government and academia. They had paid for the results they wanted, and then the government education...
Well, I don't know that they're in bed with academia when they bought scientific studies, which you can do when you find particularly unscrupulous scientists.
Pushed out those results onto the public. What later turned out to be
Good night,
true
Crochet
is
Whimsy.
the exact opposite. Lean meats are one of the healthiest foods someone can consume. Fat is fattening, but it does actually fill someone up, while sugar is the
Also, I don't know that you should take nutritional advice from this guy, number one. And number two, everything in moderation.
opposite, keeping you hungry. What all of this covered up was the rise of seed oils and
How old is he again? He's like 22 years old, guys. The rise of seed oils. The seeds will get you.
high fructose corn syrup. Due to getting the wrong advice, obesity skyrocketed vastly.
Genuinely, I don't think there's I don't know that there's any conclusive evidence about seed oils being bad for you. The rise of high fructose corn syrup, though, is probably bad. If you have a lot of that, that's probably bad for you. The same, it's bad for you to have a lot of sugar.
Faster in America vis-a-vis other Western countries where this didn't happen. Again, the elites massively lied. I grew up in the Rust Belt.
I mean, I think that there's an argument to be made that like the way our bread is treated in America is like a huge contributor to like obesity rates. But that's that and like high fructose corn syrup and everything. Those two things I think are basically account for America's, situation.
It was an area that used to be the wealthiest place in the world, and then as
Scientific evidence of the rise of big seed oil.
I've got so many, you get so many stories coming at us. It's like drinking from a fire hose. But there are a cadre of people out there who are going to hold Trump to account for hiring a seed oil lobbyist.
Yeah, split him.
So good stuff.
I mean, it's crazy, these sorts of things. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary guy, literally worked for Soros a couple of times as a hedge fund guy.
Right.
And Trump's just like...
Jeff Bezos came, Bill Gates came, Mark Zuckerberg came.
And
no, come on, this is gross. This is all about Trump's like cookie party when they're in that weird circle jerk thing. I don't want to hear about that.
Jeff Bezos came.
Jeez.
Gates came. Mark Zuckerberg came. Elon came numerous times. The bankers have all come. Everybody's coming.
numerous times.
And of course, Stephen Miller ate the cookie. Little Stephen ate the cookie. He's the one who gets the cookie. Yeah, we gave him the cookie. We gave him the cookie.
Great setup.
We give him the cookie. We gave him the cookie. He wanted it.
Who's all come here, Mr. Trump?
He's wanted it. He wanted the cookie, so
I can't even look at you right now.
Can I just say I love Sam and I love Emma. I think Emma's like a sleeper. Like Emma like will like make you think like, she's like very innocent, and then like sometimes she has like the dirtiest joke of the whole lot of them. Like it blindsides me every time,
You are having an emotional breakdown right now.
Talk about seed oil.
See,
See what I mean? See what I mean? Hey.
Oh, come on now, me.
There you go. Stephen didn't like that joke. He'll still eat the cookie, though.
Oh, God. That was really good. Thank you for sharing that, Uncle Gumbald. Love the Majority Report, peeps. God, we still have 13 minutes of this. Now, folks, remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that follow button while you're at it. Do the things. Click the buttons. With that, let's continue on, shall we? We are so close to the end of this. If we can just put up with a little bit more bullshit, we might be able to find out what the greatest lie ever told is. We're 35 minutes and 10 seconds into this video, and we haven't found it yet.
factories moved to Mexico or China, the region went into rapid decline. Philadelphia has a lower population today than it did in 1950. This was something that was completely obvious to me growing up, since I saw the decay everywhere. The elites said that the free trade was good by definition. And
yeah, because it made the elites wealthier. It made the elites wealthier. They just had to move some factories overseas. They don't give a fuck about you because capitalism doesn't give a fuck about you. It gives a fuck about the profit margins.
And would cause progress for everyone. This was an economic position held with religious certainty, where it was a definition from
It's just that was just Reaganomics repackaged, man.
Definition. You weren't allowed to question it. However, when the Rust Belt crashed and the quality of life for the average American collapsed precipitously from 1970 onwards.
Yeah, I wonder what happened in 1970. Could it have been Ronald Reagan?
This is what the elite did. Firstly, they said that it wasn't happening. Then they said they would fix it, which they didn't. Then they said you were a bad person for noticing and you should be grateful that you helped progress happen. I have a friend who invented a term I love called pinkerism, or since there are more toilets in Africa, thus progress has happened, and thus the complete collapse of American society is fine. The elites completely—
What are you talking about? Logic did not follow.
Lied about the decline in quality of life for the average American until Trump and COVID forced their hand. Bringing up any of these questions.
Also, just real quick, I wanna point something out here. If you will direct your attention to the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see this made by Nas Scent Bowl Gang. Huh, that's a weird name. Wonder what that is. Nas Scent Bowl. Well, that's interesting. It seems to stand for National Centrist Bolshevism, a synthesis of neoliberalism and National Bolshevism, also known as a Nazbol. They're Nazis. This is a Nazi meme.
At the time would make you socially shamed and outcasted from society. I have still run into lots of very educated people who think that quality of life hasn't declined since the 60s. Then they said anyone who noticed was a bad person. For a very recent example of all of this, let's see how the Biden administration just added nearly 1 million jobs to the employment stats that never existed. That's a large enough numeric discrepancy that it has to be an outright lie, not a mistake. They had been campaigning off fake stats for the whole Biden presidency and then felt no shame when they were called out. Furthermore, this is just what we know about. What else have they been lying about? Something else I've thought up myself is how the rise in digital information about human nature will probably revolutionize the world. As of now, the internet and these cell phones create an unfiltered look at human nature that's not comparable.
Things your phone knows when you're dreaming based off your breathing patterns.
To anything before in human history. As the amazing book Everyone Lies talks about, people will share things they won't even tell their closest friends with Google search.
Yeah, of course they do. Like, I don't know, if you Google, how do I get this cucumber out of my ass? And then you manage to get the cucumber out of your ass. It's not really a story you want to tell someone. Yeah.
Internet sees what poor people watch, how they react emotionally to things, what motivates or interests them. If they want to be even more predatory, these tech—
I don't want it to get out of my ass. I want it to flourish. Is this where Nazgul comes from? No, Nazgul comes from Tolkien. Nazbol is National Bolshevik. It's fascist. They're just Nazis. Nazis by a different name. They're the Nazis who are like, we're gonna do socialism right this time, and they're just Nazis.
Companies or the government could listen in on our conversations, hear the speed of your breathing as you sleep, or watch any moment of your life completely legally. I think this information will shed a new light on human nature in a way that's historically unprecedented. It will paint an unflattering light, but a real one. I think the ramifications—
Yeah, I'm both tickled and disturbed by the fact that so many of you want cucumbers in your asses.
On philosophy, the social sciences, and human nature will be the equivalent to the axial age, or how Buddha, Confucius, Lao Tzu, and Socrates all lived at the same time. The axial age created a quantum shift in understanding of human nature and human society.
I don't think you understand what a quantum shift means. I don't think you're allowed to use the word quantum.
Which I think will happen soon. Part 3, How the Lie Happened. The question I posited at the beginning of the video still bugs me. How come a society with the most information ever, with lots of people with very high IQs and freedom of speech, was able to push the most ridiculous lie ever told for nearly a person's entire lifetime? I want to remind all of us about this. Most of us were complicit in this lie in one way or another. I know I was. I believed most of these silly things as a child, as did everyone I knew. Once you realize,
back when I was a child, 3 years ago,
we all accepted these lies, it forces you to look at the post-World War II era very differently. The short answer is I think the liberal West had more in common with Stalinist or Soviet Russia than we want to give justice.
Yeah, you're gonna have to elaborate on that point quite a bit there, bud, because I'm not seeing it.
Which was actually a European reactionary talking point, as Balaji likes to say in the 19th century.
Yeah, what was that actually a European ultra-conservative talking point? That's crazy. I never would have guessed that from the guy posting Nazbol memes.
Faith in God was the unifying force in society. In the 20th, the state was, and in the 21st, it will likely be networks attached to the internet.
Wait a minute. Hey, do you guys remember, like, maybe a year or so ago, and I forced you all to do a deep dive with me on a man named Balaji Srinivasan? You know, the guy who wrote about how basically if you're a tech billionaire, you can basically just seize a city or a small state of land and rule over it as a god king, as long as you have the police on your side and use drones and surveillance to, control everything going on there, right? Interesting fact about Balaji Srinivasan here is that he wrote a book called The Network State, and that's exactly where Rutgerd is getting his ideas here. You can see this is the cover of the book. It has a section titled God State Network. This is the techno-feudalism, techno-fascism idea. Again, this guy's a fascist.
Century, faith in God was the unifying force in society. In the 20th, the state was, and in the 21st, it will likely be networks attached to the internet. We only realize this.
And by the way, I do encourage, if you guys want to know more, I do encourage you to go, I know on my YouTube channel, they're there somewhere, going over Balaji Srinivasan's various podcast appearances, because he talks about this at length, and he's just a fascist, you know? He's just talking about, like, as an independent businessman, seizing control over the police and then using the police to crush your opposition and end democracy.
In retrospect, but the 20th century involved giving unelected bureaucratic authorities ludicrous amounts of power, which was...
Oh, yes. Adi plays. He is very stupid, but he tries to sound smart. And unfortunately, if you just try to sound smart with confidence, that will take you all the way to the top in conservative circles.
Almost always abused in absurd ways, which we only later realized through the networks the internet gave us. This is something that the historical authors I love to read from the World War era, like Amaury de Riencourt, C.S. Lewis, James Burnham, George Orwell, Carroll Quigley, Spengler, and William McNeill all agree on. That the West over the world wars gave the bureaucracy enormous power without check, and they all agreed that it was the greatest danger to Western civilization of anything. What James Burnham and Sam Francis especially predicted is that the bureaucracy would start to warp and break society in their self-interest in ways that people at the time wouldn't be able to realize the true extent of. What both of those authors did very well was they showed how a society's religion, ideology, and how it processed the world is all a reflection of its elite self-interest. I'll explain it in this way. In the 20th century, the only way to coordinate was through the bureaucracy. The television, newspapers, and universities created an illusion of free information, but the reality is that these were all controlled by small cabals of certain types of people. Probably less than 100 people in 1985 controlled the flow of the vast majority of information in the Western world.
You know, very interesting choice of words there with small cabals. What an interesting choice of words there.
This was an era in which that type of person was assorted by the college system and were overwhelmingly left of center. People would joke about how conservatives would talk about the liberal elite destroying society, but even the most radical conservatives probably didn't understand how crazy what was actually going on was. We only realized how powerful this was in retrospect, and that the internet does the opposite. Let's look at the story about Venezuelan gangs taking over a town in Colorado.
Oh, please do. I actually know a lot about this. Let's go. I've done like 4 videos about this.
Or the Haitians supposedly eating cats in Ohio. In a pre-internet world,
I have no idea whether the story of Haitians eating cats is true. I have a policy of not believing most things which have occurred in the last few years. However, the theme of this video is that the elite could be massively lying about this, and it is. Who checks the fact checkers? So the elite are lying about Haitians eating cats, but you have no idea if it's true or not. That's a weird juxtaposition of certainty and uncertainty about this particular incident. You're either certain or you're not, man.
If the media chose not to cover those stories, people would just never know about them. One of the interesting things I find anthropologically is that people's concepts of places like Africa are colored by what vloggers say about those countries now. This creates a rawer sense of those places, while we've found the mainstream media in previous decades when they went to third world countries were very heavily sanitizing what they chose to show the public. An important point here is that for most of history, the society was racist and sexist and hierarchical and that stuff because that was a reflection of the people in those societies.
Yes, because those ideas are socially constructed.
While in the post-World War II era, the elites actively pushed against those things, which is why the society was less of any of those negative traits.
In the 1950s, it wasn't less of any of those traits. It wasn't being pushed by the elites. People on the ground actively fought a grueling campaign of decades in order to find and arrive at a point of equality. Like, the civil rights didn't just happen because the elites felt like it was a good idea. It took the coordination and fighting of like millions of people together in order to win them.
Because it wasn't really about the people in the society. It was about a small ruling class projecting their social...
A small ruling class. I wonder what all these people have in common in Whatifalthist's eyes.
Ideas onto the rest. This is why a suicidal cult that believes reality doesn't exist was able to take over the West.
Again, there's no one that like people are like I'm on the left. I'm very far left. We still believe reality exists.
The vast majority of people in the West disagreed with those sentiments. We can see this in Western Europe, in which...
What is the necklace made out of? I don't know, like some kind of bronze costume jewelry. It's not fancy.
Well pulled, consistently 3/4 of Europeans have wanted no immigration, but since the Uniparty supports it, it continues to happen. Sam Huntington did a study of the social values of the average American.
And I'm just throwing this out there, maybe there's not a Uniparty, but instead there is a confluence of incentives that capitalism creates in order to maintain a flow of a workforce into the country that's willing to do jobs for low wages. You know, maybe capitalism incentivizes that.
American in the 1990s. He found that if America was a real democracy into the 20th century, reflecting the public's desires, it would basically be a theocracy in which homosexuality would be illegal, Christianity taught in schools, and the state enforced Christianity, since that's what most Christians supported into the 1990s, but a small agnostic elite meant that the cultural current went in the opposite direction. We've consistently found a lot of these were pushed by the CIA. Modern art, modern feminism, Margaret.
Oh man, I love the idea that the gay rights movement was pushed by the CIA. Hell yeah. Who knew? The woke CIA.
Mead and other things were funded by the CIA. This is stuff the CIA openly, publicly has announced as well. When we look at what the CIA was funding, they were consistently pushing blank slatist ideas. This was since for the government and people in power, the blank slate makes them more powerful, since the engineering of human nature to perfection offers a perfect carte blanche in order to keep.
What are you talking? The organizing of human beings. What are you talking about? Your perception of perfection here is not the same thing as reality.
Expanding the power of the state forever. On top of this, it removes the obvious fear that concentrating power in the hands of the government like this naturally leads to tyranny because human nature is perfectible and progressing. To see the other side of this exact equation, the CIA sat on their discoveries of the spirit world for decades. I know what I said is absolutely insane, but watch my...
I'm not going to watch that. I'm not going to watch that. I'm not going to watch that. You guys can't make me, and I'm not going to do it.
My video on the topic. This always shocked me, given if I discovered a huge spiritual dimension scientifically.
He's not wrong, it is insane, that's true.
I would want to share it with the public to create an enormous positive social spiritual revolution. However, even when the CIA did release Project Gateway 50 years after it was done, they removed the page on its implication for world religions, which the guy who ran the experiments had to release without their consent. That's since a world with religion and God is one where people need the state and the authorities less. When all's said and done, for something like this, we can partly believe that the authorities pushed this, while at the same time, this is a game that both sides played into. The public happily ate up all of these absurdities. That's since the public desperately wanted it to be true. It's no surprise that knowing human nature for what it is, that if a society had infinite wealth, it would then allow itself to become infinitely stupid. We wanted to believe that everyone is equal, that we were all blank slates, that the scary demons of the past didn't reflect anything today, that women were the same as men, that all nations were the same, and half a dozen other silly things. I like to stop here and give the West a legitimate amount of credit that when it became an incredibly wealthy society, rather than most empires which spend that on luxuries and sex slaves and gladiatorial games and that stuff, the West used its enormous wealth to try to help people and make the world a better place and push for people's collective good. It horribly backfired and became a suicidal nihilistic death cult, but I do want to give the West credit. If you study the Old Testament, you find the consistent pattern that in hard times, men look to God. Then life gets better due to that, and then men leave God. Then the world goes to hell, and the cycle restarts. This is...
I'm so tired. I'm so tired. Guys, I had to look up somebody summarizing the what Rudyard's video is about, and essentially, guys, it's about a Project Gateway that the CIA did and then shut down because it was a failure, because they were trying to learn how to like do astral projection and shit to like get information, and then it turned out you couldn't actually astrally project yourself in order to do spy work. And, you know, like a bunch of people in the programs that claimed to have the ability to predict the future. One said that the world was going to end in the 90s. It's just not really a thing. They didn't discover the spirit world. The premise of Stranger Things, probably.
just who we are as a species. And thinkers as far back as Herodotus, Ibn Khaldun, or Plato talk about this eternal pattern. We became such a wealthy society that we simply lost the desire to understand reality. We grew fat while the elite fed us the most ridiculous lies. It's funny, the world's a lot less real when there's not the threat of extinction at your throat. If I'm going to be perfectly blunt, the reason I went down this rabbit hole is I realized we were screwed if we didn't. I'm a young guy stuck in a society in collapse. Thus, I'm stuck here for a long time and have an incentive to figure stuff out. I can understand why an older person would just say, let me die in peace. My motivation to figure this out comes from self-interest, and our current elite doesn't have the self-interest to change since they're in power. Let's not pretend that if the world wasn't going to hell, we wouldn't all be stuck in Plato's rave. We are all complicit, at least somewhat, in the greatest lie ever told. I like the metaphor for Plato's cave, not rave, in that Plato was trying to convey how most people are stuck in the outward trappings of things while being completely incapable of seeing the underlying forms of reality. I think that's a generally accurate summation of human nature over history, in which the general population has myths which act as rough approximations of their worldview, which can't convey the complexity of an underlying reality. However,
I feel really bad for this guy. I mean, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't, but like right now I just feel sad. Imagine going through all of this work, all of this effort, and like you're so easily pleased with yourself. Like why you're absolutely coked out on your own supply, you know?
However, I prefer a slight variation to this. Let's look at The Matrix. The Matrix was more real than its authors intended, or I think even understood, given the writers were leftists and later trans. The Matrix is...
Yeah, I'm sure they didn't understand the premise of their work, but yeah, I'm sure it's them who didn't understand, and definitely not you.
Real, and that the 20th century was a false reality, which the authorities enforced on the populace. The populace went along with it since it was so comforting compared to the reality. Anyone who questioned said false reality, which the authorities enforced on the population, would be outcasted from the system.
Yeah, this is Klaus Schwab, I believe, right? Yeah, there he is. His name's on the thing. What power do you think Klaus Schwab has to outcast you from the system? Like, genuinely, I can go on the internet and say Klaus Schwab is a gigantic piece of shit with the curly Q-shaped dick. You know, I can literally say whatever I want. You know, and I'm not going to be outcasted from the system. Like, that's not a thing that's going to happen to me. So, like, I mean, I feel like this is also partly like an anti-Semitic dog whistle. Of course, Rudyard would believe that, you know?
Either socially or economically, or even sometimes thrown in jail. The post-World War II West evolved into a greater social tyranny than the Catholic Church ever was. We are
I don't know about that one.
Living in the Matrix, and most people are still glued into this false reality that never really existed. A sort of parallel dimension. Rather than Plato's cave, we live in Foucault's cardboard box. In that the modern world isn't even cool enough to be a cave. It's a cardboard box to illustrate its artificiality, sterility, and boredom. It's crazy to read books from previous history, as recently as World War I. Back then, people saw the world as incredible, mystical, beautiful, and heroic. Now, our elite hates any genuine feeling, duality, mystery, or drama. Prove me wrong. Our society hates heroism, romance, mystery, honor, the mystical and dramatical.
Yeah, that's definitely why people hate all of those things in movies. Yep.
Believing in anything is cringe. The world that the managers push is an inhuman, cruel, controlled, and depressing place. A place where life itself is boring, sterile, and nothing is worth anything. Once we realize we're stuck in a cardboard box, beyond which is the whole world in all its insanity, is the day we truly start to live. Once we can move past the comforting lies we were fed, even if it's excruciatingly painful and hard, we will start to be able to truly live for the first time. It's getting to be less of a choice as the rain is starting to melt through the cardboard box. We'll end up wet either way, so why not make the jump?
In short, Elon Musk's brain is well and truly cooked. he has ingested enough ketamine that he thinks this guy is brilliant and onto something. And I need to really reiterate for all of you guys that, like, the reason we had to pay attention to what Rudyard was saying here is because apparently Elon Musk watches his videos. And I've got bad news for you. It's probably going to get worse from here as his ego explodes. You know, we're going to get some real...
The spirits like to convey the message that you should mentally see me as Gandalf.
This dude's very online and is almost certainly going to make a video about how Elon Musk was so right for amplifying his video. After all, he is an avatar of Odin. Thanks, that was awful. My pleasure to serve. Oh, with that, folks, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It's very important, especially on these longer videos. Go out and do the thing. You know, the thing that helps me. It helps me a lot when you type. And I'm exhausted and have been streaming for over 7 hours now. And thank you all for being here with me. It makes it bearable.
Riverboat Jack is coming to town. All the viewers gather around. Twitch and YouTube and switching streams. All that content is bursting the scenes. Politics, being flame more. Your sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord. Riverboat Jack.